right, guys, first question of the day. Is bozo really a word that should get you ejected from an NBA game? That's just going to be how we
No,
start off the show.
absolutely not. I mean, if you're a bozo, you're a bozo. I mean, it's no different than if I look at you, Jonathan, and I'm like, what the hell were you thinking? I mean, it's the same thing. And if Chris Finch goes to the official and says, what the hell were you thinking? Yeah, tee him up. But I mean, to toss a guy for that, that's absurd.
Yeah, I agree. That was finding out that was what he said. I was like, you're really gonna throw him out of the game for that? And I get that it wasn't an isolated incident. I think Finch, as Nikhil Alexander Walker said, he woke up choosing violence yesterday and was on the refs for a lot of that game. He got the first tech in the first half, apparently for profanity. But bozo is not a profane word, so I think he should have gotten a slightly longer leash. But it also sort of seemed like he wasn't totally opposed to the idea of getting kicked out as a final way to light a fire under his team, and seeing him go after the referee like that and have to get held back by Anthony Edwards was pretty good.
Didn't the American people just vote for more foul language and more of a rude approach to social interaction? Didn't we just all vote for that? And we can't get away with bozo now? Okay.
I guess. It was
yeah. I was just going to say, the things we called each other when I was in high school back in 2000 was, boy, I tell you what. You know what?
Bozo's something like you'd call your kid if you're like irritated because they did something stupid.
You know what? My dad used to say, I'm going to rip off your head and spit down your throat. So I think bozo's fine.
Yeah, bozo shouldn't be an ejectable offense, but as you guys pointed out, it seemed like it was just the last straw of many that Chris Finch had put up on the day, because he was clearly irate and clearly irritated. But the Wolves pull off a very fun, a very gritty 121-113 win. It's their fourth win in a row. Are they turning things around? Are we seeing this team start to finally hit the stride? I know I saw Michael Grady on Twitter saying that was his favorite game of the year. Still a lot of basketball to be played, but a good building block for something to build off of for the rest of the season. Is this now a team that should really be feared in the Western Conference? They're just, a game out from sixth place in the Western Conference after that win behind the Clippers. Are we starting to see this team turn into what we saw last year? Will, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think there's certainly signs of it. I mean, two of their three best games of the season, two of my three favorite games of the season to watch have come in the last three games, I should say. That win over Denver on Saturday in Minneapolis, and then last night's game in Phoenix, kind of running it back against those first two playoff opponents from last year. And you're just starting to see some of the fire, some of the intensity. And it was sandwiched around a game against a shorthanded Hawks team on Monday night, where there was not very much of that at all, which is why Finch was pissed, I think, for like 48 hours in a row from the after that Hawks game through the apparently legendary film session Wednesday morning and into the game against the Suns. But yeah, I do think you're seeing some of it. And Anthony Edwards is playing at a very, very high level right now, and he was clearly reveling in that win over Phoenix late in that game and what they've done to that team the last like 6 times they've played them. Jaden McDaniels, Finch said yesterday, is playing the best basketball of his career right now. And it's not as many kind of corner threes and things like that, but he's really making quick decisions and attacking. And that's we've said all along, that can be a game changer for the Wolves. And then you've got, I mean, they didn't have Naz Reid last night, but Julius Randle has 28 points, no turnovers, really, really strong game. He still can't make a three to save his life. But when he's playing on the interior against teams that are going a little smaller, I mean, he was bullying the Suns. And then you got Nikhil Alexander Walker having at least a season high, maybe a career high. He had 23 points, 5 threes. Jalen Clark comes in and plays some awesome defense. Like, it's starting to be fun again. And that's what I think was missing in a lot of the first half of the season. Some of that intensity, some of that fun that was really just, it was so joyous in the playoff run last year, especially those first 2 series. So it does seem like they're sort of getting there. 4 wins in a row. Now they got to prove that they can keep it going in this kind of weaker patch of schedule starting tonight against Utah.
Yeah, I think we've all learned that we have to go by the motto of, in Tim Connolly and Chris Finch we trust, right? So they make the trade, Cat for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. The transition is not smooth by any means, especially for DiVincenzo, who was just awful for a very long stretch. He couldn't shoot. He looked like he was Golden State DiVincenzo and not New York DiVincenzo. And then he gets hot when he gets put in the starting lineup, gets hurt, but now we get the good injury nose, and he'll be back likely within a few weeks, right? But now Julius Randle's starting to look like an absolute game changer. And my hope is that this isn't like the D'Angelo Russell factor where, it's like D'Lo disease. Right before the trade deadline, you don't want to be moved, so you up your game and you bring it at a higher level than you do every other night of the season. And then the trade deadline passes, you don't get moved, and you're like, okay, I don't have to try so hard anymore. I'm still here. I can pick up my player option next season. I'm settled. Everybody is happy. But I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think this is legit a situation where it took a while to figure out where he fits best in this rotation. And he has certainly found it. And his playmaking ability and the bully ball and the ability to D up and use his large frame has been evident for a good stretch now. And this is coming at a time when Minnesota, by all of the data points, is one of the most dangerous teams in the league. I mean, the numbers on there above the break threes, I think they're hitting like 39.5% of them this season. I saw somebody tweet, I can't remember, and I hate to not give credit, but it's the highest total for any team in the NBA since the 15-16 Golden State Warriors. That should strike fear in the eyes of every single opponent. The offensive rating is got to be top 6 in the last few weeks in the NBA. They're firing on all cylinders. Rudy Gobert is actually playmaking out of the middle of the floor right now, which is taking the pressure off of Anthony Edwards. Like Will said, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is an assassin on corner three-pointers. He's all over the place on defense. I mean, this is a team that did something to Phoenix that had won 8 out of 10 in their building without 2 of their top 7 guys, Naz Reid and DiVincenzo. I mean, they just took it to him in that second half, and it was bully ball, and it was abusive. And that's the kind of basketball that the Timberwolves played in the playoffs last season until they met Dallas. This, for sure, is a team that is starting to fire on all cylinders and trusting the process, which myself, I'll admit, very difficult to do. But if we trust Connolly, we trust Finch, that they know what they're doing. They haven't let us down, let Minnesotans down at all in their tenure here so far. The results are going to come. And I think we're starting to see that. And as I look at the schedule, guys, we're about to flip the calendar to February. I don't see another loss until maybe they go to Cleveland on February 10th. Utah Thursday night, win. Washington, Sacramento, Chicago, Houston, Portland, all of them in Minneapolis. Those are all winnable games. And we could very well be looking at a team that is more than 10 games over 500 in the blink of an eye and probably a top 4 seed down the stretch run.
I was just going to ask because the February schedule, you look at it past those games that you mentioned, even Houston there, second place in the Western Conference right now. Past those games, it becomes a major gauntlet. You have Cleveland, Milwaukee, Oklahoma City, Houston, Oklahoma City twice in a row, Los Angeles, before a trip to Utah and then out to Phoenix again. It becomes a real gauntlet. Have these last 4 games instilled some confidence that they can get through that fairly unscathed?
Yeah, I wrote about this prior to the Hawks game on Monday, that they needed to take advantage. It was an 8-game stretch because after that, there's a 7-game stretch that's about as tough as it gets, sandwiched around the All-Star break, which includes 3 games against the Thunder in a span of 4 games around the All-Star break, somewhat randomly. But I said they needed to go at least 6-2 during this 8. They're already 2-0. Obviously, they were going to beat Atlanta even if they played a C- game like they did. And then to win at Phoenix was one of the 2 that I thought was the 2 toughest in this little 8-game stretch. They do still have next Thursday against Houston on the second night of a back-to-back. Houston's a very good team. But like Joe said, that game is at home. I think you got to try to win. You got to hope to win at least 5 of the next 6 and go 7-1 in that stretch that I was talking about. Because they shouldn't by any means lose tonight in Utah unless they just don't take the game seriously, which I don't think they will after the intensity of last night. I think they're going to want to carry that over. And then you can't possibly lose to Washington. I guess I shouldn't say you can't possibly, but Washington's like 6-45 or something.
Well, they're not the Blazers. The Blazers are Minnesota's kryptonite, so I think we're safe.
True. Yeah, and then they get Portland at the end of this stretch. But yeah, then it's Milwaukee, OKC, All-Star break, Houston, OKC, LA. Cleveland before that. So yeah, that one's tough. And I was like, if you can go 3-4 in that stretch, that'd be great. And yes, to answer your question, I do now have more confidence than I did a week ago that they can go 3-4 or even 4-3 in that stretch. Because when they play like they did for a lot of that Suns game last night and a lot of that Nuggets game this past Saturday, they can beat anybody. They can hang with the Thunder. I mean, we've seen them hang with the Thunder already this year to some degree. And I just, the reason I've had a lot of confidence all along, I mean, it's been a shaky first half for sure. And my confidence has wavered at times. And it's been kind of a roller coaster of, oh, the Wolves are back. Oh, it's so over. Oh, we're so back. The thing that's given me confidence all along is that they have Anthony Edwards leading this thing. And he is, when he's playing his game and he's locked in on both ends, one of the 10 best players in the league and just an incredible leader in the way that he kind of brings people along with him with that fire. It can be really contagious. And now you've got Jaden playing like this. And I want to see Julius Randle do it against teams other than the Suns. He seems to just cook them every time. He had 35 in a game winner in the first meeting and then 28 last night. So maybe just a really good matchup for him. But a lot of the pieces are there to do that last night, like Joe said, with no Naz Reid, no Dante DiVincenzo. I mean, I still think that this team, if they can get in as a 4 seed, 5 seed, even a 6 seed, whatever it is, avoid the play-in, they can be dangerous. They're going to be a lower seeded team that one of those top teams in the West is not going to want to see in the first round.
Yeah, and you look at the schedule upcoming. It is a gauntlet mid-February to the end of the month, but you got 3 against Oklahoma City, and you've got Houston in there. I mean, let's not forget that this is virtually the same roster minus Karl Anthony Towns that a lot of us thought was actually a more balanced, better roster overall with the acquisition of DiVincenzo and Randall and more minutes for Naz Reid than last year's team. And last year's team was, very talented and better than OKC. I know OKC had the better record in the regular season, but that was a team that nobody wanted to play. Nobody wanted to play Minnesota when they're playing defense the way they're capable of playing. And now you get a sniff of Jalen Clark and the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year at UCLA. He's healthy. You see what he was doing last night. I mean, in his first real NBA action, that was incredible to see. That's awesome. Another player Minnesota can bring onto the floor if they want and trust. He just proved it. So if let's say Naz Reid's having an off night on defense and he's getting bully balled around and he's struggling, well, bring in Jalen Clark, play a little small ball and make it real difficult to beat anybody on the dribble. Because if you have a lineup with Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Jalen Clark, and then you have Rudy down there in the paint, that's an insane defensive lineup. Or
they ran the lineup last
Jaden
night.
McDaniels,
with no, it wasn't Conley, it was Jaden. It was Nickeil, Jalen Clark, Ant, Jaden, and Rudy. And that's like everybody on that list could make an all-defense team someday. I don't know if Jalen Clark will ever play enough on the offensive side to do it, but he is unbelievable with his feet and his activity defensively. That was really cool to watch. And it's going to lead to some questions, I think, when everybody's healthy about how Finch can I think get some more than 8 guys in this rotation, because Rob's been proving that he deserves some time. Jalen Clark arguably deserves some time. I mean, Luka Garza made a 3 last night, but those will be interesting discussions once Dante is back, which is still a ways away.
I was saying this at the beginning of the season. Real quick, guys. I was saying this at the beginning of the season. The flexibility of this lineup is really scary if you think about its potential, because if you need a bucket in clutch time, now this actually includes Rob Dillingham too, because he's an absolute machine when he's got the ball in his hands and he can score at any point. But you've got Dillingham, you've got Mike Conley, you have Anthony Edwards, you have Dante DiVincenzo, Naz Reid, Julius Randle. I mean, you could run on a 5-man lineup where anybody can get a bucket. They can all shoot the 3. They can all beat you off the dribble. And the way Jaden's playing right now, he's another option. So that's a scary thing. And then if you need to lock down, it's the defensive rotations, the lineups, the 5-man combos that you can put out there that we just talked about. This team, in any situation, if you need a bucket or a stop, is really dangerous in close games. And what do we know about this team? They've played in a lot of close games. And now that they're starting to find ways to win, ooh, baby, once they get fully healthy, that should strike fear in every opponent's eyes down the stretch. And I think it already is.
So let me ask you this. You guys talked about Jalen Clark and his awesome kind of actual official debut last night, unofficial debut because he's played before, but got his first real minutes last night. You've got guys like Leonard Miller, who's in the Rising Stars Challenge game, who's been balling out in the G League. You've got Rob Dillingham, Josh Minot, Terrence Shannon Jr., Luca Garza, all these young guys there that we've been talking about, it feels like for years now, that these guys could fill in and provide some really good minutes for this team. I know a lot of the talk that we've had on this program as well, and a lot of the talk around the Wolves over the past couple weeks leading up to next Thursday's trade deadline has been, what are they going to do with Julius Randle? How are they going to find a piece that helps them out in the long run? Let's look at it with these guys, these young guys in there that don't get a lot of minutes, that probably should be earning more minutes. Do the Wolves really need to trade if they've got all this talent in their depth that they just don't use for some reason? Do they really need to find a trade, or can they find a way to compete in the upper echelons of the Western Conference with just keeping this roster intact as it is right now because of the depth that they've shown that they have in their reserves?
I don't think they're going to make a deal. I think you've got a lot of these Wolves reporters and insiders saying that they are not going to salary dump Julius Randle and just move him to get off of the contract and eliminate the possibility of him picking up his option next year. That's just probably not going to happen because they still feel like he can do good things for them and be part of winning and be part of contending this year. And, that looked pretty good last night against the Suns. We still need to see it more consistently from Randle, the effectiveness, the energy, maybe not pounding the air out of the ball sometimes down low, not taking too many threes, but he looked really good in his role last night. And I do think that Tim Connolly, Chris Finch, I think they believe in what they have. If they could somehow add like a Cam Johnson to this team, that would be awesome. I think that would be a great fit, but that's just not realistic. Given the picks that you would need to attach, and the Wolves only have one pick they can trade. The Randall market is, and the contract and the second apron stuff. Like, I just think it's going to be tough for them to make a trade that brings in a player who can clearly help them, which means I think it's probably going to be a quiet deadline. And then maybe they reevaluate the possibility of a Randall trade around the draft or next offseason to avoid maybe him picking up the player option. But also, if he plays a lot more like he did last night down the stretch, he's probably not going to pick up that option and is going to seek a multi-year deal from somebody. So I do think you make a good point. Like, this team has guys waiting in reserve who can really play basketball, and they haven't gotten much of an opportunity because the 8-man rotation, sometimes 9, is really good. But you saw it last night. If Naz Reid is out, if Dante DiVincenzo's out, they've got guys that they can go to for depth who can help you win games. And I think that is a really encouraging thing to have, because you just never know when you're going to need to call upon that depth.
Do you ever wonder, like, who John Krasinski's sources are? Because I sit here and I try to connect dots, and yes, I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I might align with Kyrie Irving on some issues here and there, but you watch John
We
Krasinski's
should
reporting.
specify which ones.
Yeah, you might get in trouble if you don't specify.
No, I won't. But about that super volcano. Anyway, John Krasinski reported, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and he used the word internal. Like, most of the improvements from this roster, he doesn't see a Julius Randle trade likely. He thinks that, from what he knows and what he's been told, is that the Timberwolves are looking internally for improvements. And then Chris Finch comes out a handful of days ago, and he uses the same vocabulary internally. So I'm sitting here connecting dots, and I'm like, man, I wonder if John Krasinski, who's the A-grade, Hollywood best Timberwolves insider there is, the most trustworthy, if his source is Chris Finch. They're using the same language. Maybe Chris Finch is reading John Krasinski's work or listening to his podcast, but one way or another, they're using the same language. So when that happens, I immediately get the tell that, oh yeah, there's nothing that's going to happen at this trade deadline. Maybe they'll shed some salary, some scraps here or there, or something like that, but nothing of significant movement. Maybe they acquire a second-round draft pick for somebody. I don't know, to shed some salary. But to me, all you got to do is follow the smell, and the smell says, hey, these guys are on the same page, and this is all internal. And I'm on to you, Johnny K. I'm on to you. I know who your source is.
I I like that this stems over the use of the word internal. Like,
But I mean, do you use that when you're talking very often?
No,
it
but
bring me-
I don't know how else you would describe that. Like from within, I suppose you.
Well,
could
there you
say,
go.
But
You just did it.
yeah.
No, we
I
like
did
our
just
roster. Do anything. That's all you got to
Yep.
say. Well,
All
I
right.
think it's
I
going to be internal. It's a very corporate way to talk, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, very much so.
I do
All
think they like their roster, and I think it was games like last night that kind of justify that belief. Now I just want to see it more consistently, specifically from Randall, but also Ant, Jaden, other guys playing at the level they've been playing at recently. Rudy's been rebounding the ball. I don't think it's just all going to be sunshine and rainbows for the next however many 40 games they have left, 30 something. Like there's going to be some times where it swings back, but right now I think this is the most on the upswing that I have felt about the Wolves all season. I mean, they're 5 games above 500. They've won 4 in a row. They can keep playing like this. It starts to get pretty exciting when you think about the ceiling of this team, regardless of what has happened up to this point.
Yeah. So for me, pending what happens before the February 6th trade deadline, I look at the West and I can confidently say that there's only 3 teams I think Minnesota should be worried about. One, OKC. They're a juggernaut. I'm not worried about Houston if I'm Minnesota because they haven't been there before. I think once the playoffs come around, they're going to have to go through that hard learning curve like Minnesota had to do for a few years. I certainly would be worried about the Memphis Grizzlies. That's a matchup that has tended to go Memphis's way in a lot of these head-to-heads with Minnesota. I don't worry about Denver because Minnesota owns the Nuggets. I don't worry about the Lakers. They're old and washed. I don't worry about the Clippers. I worry about the Mavericks if Luka is healthy from that strained calf that he suffered on Christmas Day against the Timberwolves. And if Kyrie's going, they're scary as can be. You don't worry about Phoenix because, I don't care how many machine gun actions Devin Booker does on the floor. He is owned by Jaden McDaniels and anybody that faces him in Minnesota. And then the rest of the West, Golden State, Sacramento, San Antonio, I mean, they got some talent, but they're not Minnesota. Minnesota should be considered one of the 4 biggest threats to go to the finals out of the West.
I'm not worried about Houston. You make a fair point that usually young teams have to kind of take their medicine in the playoffs, like the Wolves did against Memphis and then against Denver. But that Houston team is pretty fun with Amen Thompson just being such a unique force and ridiculous athlete, and Sengun and Jalen Green and Van Vliet, and I think they're
Smith,
good.
Yeah,
Dylan Brooks. I mean, they've got some dudes there, but it might if the Wolves went into a series against Houston, I think I would like the Wolves to come out of it. That could easily go 7 games.
Yeah, no,
and then the Clippers are interesting just if they somehow happen to be healthy, because James Harden's been playing really well. Norm Powell's been playing really well. Kawhi Leonard, if he's on the floor, is still somebody you don't really want to see in a playoff series, even at this point in his career. So, but I agree. I think I would put the Wolves as one of the 4 teams with the highest ceilings in the Western Conference.
So in conclusion for the show, too long didn't watch. We're up on the Wolves being contenders in the Western Conference. We're down on Bozo being an ejectable offense in the NBA. Good stuff from you guys today. Appreciate you guys stopping by. If you do have the time, do hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. It does help us get found. Also notifies you every time we post a new video here on the YouTube channel. We'll be back tomorrow with another topic across Minnesota sports. Talk to you then.